Fantasy Footballers Podcast with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
Welcome into the castle.
I'm still in the front.
Mike is, so much to get into. Welcome to the show, the Fantasy Footballers Podcast, Tuesday, April 5th, 2016.
I just saw Jason.
Jason's with us, and
looking good.
you can't see him if you're listening on the podcast, which most of you are, and he's wearing the glasses that...
He's wearing the 90-year-old driving glasses.
Yeah, the ones you get if you got your eyes dilated at the local optometrist.
I can't see anything right now out of these glasses. It is pitch black in here.
Well, you don't need them though, right? That's the ruse.
This is the ruse. My eye has healed. It has been a blessing, and I can see.
You were down. You were hurt. And if you don't know what we're talking about, Jason was gouged in the eye by a defensive lineman in our flag football matchup. He proceeded to writhe in agony on the ground. And, you were prone. And then you got up, left the field, and came back into the game momentarily after I needed some help on the offensive line.
Playing with one eye barely
was
open.
Closed. I drove you home, and you didn't open your eye for like 3 days, and it looked bad.
Yeah,
like we made a lot of pirate jokes, but it was a serious situation.
I thought there was a chance that I might need the surgery, but it just healed, and it's great. And so,
yeah, he's doing well, and he can see, and he looks normal.
And we really appreciate.
But we still hid him back behind Mike.
Appreciate the well wish. Well, I told you. I said once I get in the front, I'm not giving it up.
And you meant it.
It's like in a band when you're a trumpet player and you got a challenge for first chair. Well, I challenged my opponent was not here to accept the challenge, so I won. And so facto, I'm in the front.
That was an injury thing. Some coaches philosophically would
Colin
put the guy
Kaepernick,
back in.
Colin Kaepernick, Alex Smith. Took your
right.
job.
I would rather be Alex Smith than Colin.
So in other words, you have a better future ahead of you than you do. All right.
Yes.
Welcome. We've got our wide receivers. We're going through wide receivers. Last week, if you didn't listen, go back, download the episodes, subscribe to the podcast, and listen to some of the older ones. We have running backs. We talked about them last week. Really good shows, some good debates. And then we've got Jason back in here now. We're going through our wide receiver, our consensus rankings. I'm not going to commit to just getting through the first 6. It depends on how the show goes. I want to get through as many as we can, and then we're going to put a bunch more into the next episode.
Sure.
I think we might be able to get through more because the first guys on the list, there's not a ton you need to say about them, but we might anyways. That's what we do. And then we got some mailbag, got some news for you. I've got an interesting quick question for you as well. I'm curious your answer. If you want to follow the show, you can do so on Twitter at the FF Ballers. Check out the website, thefantasyfootballers.com. We got really good stuff that is going to be hitting the website soon, including some new content for the tools section of the website, including a draft document that you can use as a template for your league if you want to do an offline draft and not use the live draft software. That's free. We just are putting that up there for our listeners to use because we use it in our leagues. And make sure you check us out on YouTube. Subscribe on there. All the shows are on there. You can see Jason with his entertaining glasses.
Not anymore. But
no, not anymore. All right, so quick question. This is a weird one I was pondering, and I don't even know if it makes sense. But would you rather I'm trying to put this in the Dynasty League context because you're thinking more long-term in a Dynasty League. But would you rather have a player who is coming back from their very first ACL tear, Kelvin Benjamin,
okay,
or a player that is coming back from a second or third tear but has recovered fine from the previous? For example, Jamaal Charles. Okay.
So they've gone through it.
They've
done it twice. They've already re-injured.
But now they've hurt. Yeah, they've had a second ACL tear, so you have a stack of injuries on that player.
But you know that they have the work ethic
to get back,
to get through the rehab.
So is it more like, you're a little bit more beat up, but you can come back and you've shown it,
Man.
or is it a first-time injury,
right?
And you don't know.
And
Carson Palmer's come back from 2 now.
I'm gonna take the 1. I get the argument for a guy he's been through it. Charles, we talked about him in the running back shows of coming back off his ACL tear. He was a 1. He had over 5 yards per carry average, so he was still a beast. But once you tear it once, so I'm told you're more prone to having another ACL tear. So
I've heard that percentage is very, very small.
Yeah, it's like
in difference though.
4.6%
more likely.
Yeah, within the next 2 years.
Hey, that's more than
that.
you're
still right.
Here's my answer to this, because the way that you phrase the question is, who would you rather have? And I think that it actually is different between whether, from a dynasty perspective, I've got this guy on my roster already, or who I'd rather draft, like in a redraft. So if I've already got the guy, I'm in a dynasty league, I would much rather have the guy that only tore it once, right? Because in theory, we might be a little bit younger here. They haven't had the chance to do it again. I already got him, so I'm hoping he comes back strong. But if I'm in a redraft and I'm looking at who do I draft, and I've got a guy who just tore his ACL last year, we don't know how he's ever come back, or a guy that, hey, he came back strong, Adrian Peterson or Jamaal Charles, and you're going, we already know he can come back, I'm more confident to draft a guy who's come back from it before. So I played both sides.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense, Superman.
Hedge my bets.
All right, let's get into the news.
News and notes from around the league.
What I'm about to say might very well mean we get through less wide receivers than we could on this show. But I'm opening the can of worms that is you two knuckleheads jumping down my throat this past weekend because
Absolutely.
I said that Colin Kaepernick wasn't going to be traded.
Incorrect.
No, that's correct. I did say that.
You're downplaying it. You're downplaying it.
Okay. In the beginning, I said, in the very beginning, I did not say 100% in the very beginning. I just said, I don't think he's getting traded. I think he'll be there, just like I said with Fitzpatrick, right? I said Fitzpatrick and Kaepernick are going to stay there. Apparently, I was very vehemently saying
yes,
it was 100% chance that Colin doesn't move.
Yes.
Colin is still a 49er. He's about to report to their training camp. What
so
happened is the news that broke was that the Broncos are willing to pay a portion of Kaepernick's salary. The compensation for a trade has been figured out, but Kaepernick's not willing to reduce, and I don't blame him.
Which he shouldn't be. No.
$4 million, and the Broncos aren't willing to pay it right now. The Broncos are in the worst cap situation in football in terms of total money left underneath the cap. And so I'm bringing it up just because you guys both jumped all over me like I was wrong, but I'm not wrong yet.
All right.
So I'm holding on to being right.
All right, here's so for all of our awesome Footclan listeners, you can partake in this with us, okay? You can enjoy the forthcoming Colin Kaepernick news with us, because here's what happened, and this is why it's a huge deal whether he gets traded or not within this studio. Because this was 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
So 2 weeks ago, we were discussing whether or not Colin Kaepernick could get traded. And can I be Andy for a second?
Sure.
Well, I'll pretend to be Andy. There is no way he is traded. 100%. Less than a 0% chance he's traded. Never going to happen. Not in a million years. I guarantee it. I guarantee you he will not trade. Can't be traded. Can't happen. Never, ever, ever, ever going to happen. I promise.
Gosh.
I will bet my children on it. It was basically
that
that
was
level.
that was as close to verbatim.
10%.
No, okay. It was 85%.
I'll tell you right now, there's
accurate.
100% chance that was inaccurate.
Well, yes, but that was 80% accurate. Honestly,
Yes.
Mike, it was
very, very close.
absolute. It was
Many
an
of those-
ironclad.
many
And
of those
so,
phrases.
The word
yes or
guarantee
no,
was
has
in
he
there.
been traded?
No.
Okay. We'll move on. BigTrial.net reports the Phoenix DA's office is expected to announce that LeSean McCoy will not face any charges stemming from a February 7th fight at the local nightclub. Mike made a heavy-handed LeSean McCoy joke on the last episode, but not charged. Could he still face punishment from the league?
Yeah, absolutely. He can still face it, but this is a step in the right direction.
For all Dynasty Keeper
For
owners
all
of LeSean
McCoy
McCoy,
owners-
did you have a party at a nightclub last night to celebrate?
And you know what's funny? I was thinking about this. Is LeSean McCoy the first NFL player who was happy that his actions were actually on videotape? Like, the videotape is what is going to save him from two undercover police officers giving their word of a story, which will be taken. That will be taken by the law officers, or by the
Yes.
enforcement.
By the law
The answer is
officers.
yes then.
by the enforcement, but there's actual video of
You're
it
right.
showing that, and the cops have said they found their officers' actions questionable, so that's why nothing will happen. Which
I still insist.
He could still get a game.
The 3 a.m. at a nightclub with your entourage situation.
That's tough.
Yeah, more guys get in trouble that way than, being at home.
Yeah, I agree. And the reality is he can still be suspended by the NFL, but I don't think it's going to happen. And usually I'm more on that
I tend
side.
to agree now.
So I'm actually going to bump him up. I statted LeSean McCoy in our rankings that we talked about last week with 15 games because I assumed either way he was going to get a 1-game suspension. With this news, I'm going to stat him for 16, probably move him up a spot or two. Won't really affect our consensus rankings.
I don't think he'll move very much for me because most of my I didn't really consider it too much.
Yeah. So that's pretty much all the news, right?
Yeah,
we can
that's
hop
it for
into
right
these
now.
wide receivers, get to as many as possible. But before we do that, we want to take a second and thank today's sponsor, Pristine Auction.
Oh, yeah.
You guys, the Footclan have heard us talk about Pristine Auction now for a couple of weeks. And I get commented on Twitter all the time with the joy of these new memorabilia items that are coming from Pristine Auction. People are tweeting out left and right about their new signed jerseys they've found for a screaming deal, their new helmets. Look, Father's Day is coming up, people. Father's Day is coming up, and it's not just a male sport anymore. Mother's Day is coming up, all sorts of holidays.
I hope my children are listening.
If you are ever wanting something awesome for your house, for a sports fan, for a birthday, or for yourself, here's what you do. You go to pristineauction.com. That's PRISTINE auction.com, and you check out. They have thousands of auctions. They have hundreds of daily auctions. Those are fun because you can just hop on, and they're in a couple hours. You're not going to get, you hop on, you're like, oh, I can get in on this. Do it. It is, you got to at least check out all of the awesome stuff they have, things that you wouldn't even imagine you can get at the price you can. So check out our sponsors, pristineauction.com right now.
And that's where I hit the wide receiver drop button that is frozen. So let me move on.
All right.
Wide receivers.
Oh, that's good stuff.
All right. You're talking about Pristine Auction?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good stuff. All right. Look, big surprise at the top, guys. A lot of people think maybe Jerry Rice, maybe
Get ready for a hot take, America.
Lynn Swan. No, it's Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown is the number one in our consensus rankings. And like I said, we'll go as far as we can. But Brown, the big debate for Brown isn't, is he worthy of the number one spot in the wide receiver rankings? It's, is he worthy of the number one spot in the overall rankings? He is ridiculously consistent. He offers – so there, a lot of the times wide receivers offer you different things. They offer you a long play, right? Like a guy that can get deep. Martavis Bryant makes a lot of big plays. Or they offer you volume. You've got like Golden Tate, Jarvis Landry, a player like that caliber. That,
Edelman, PPR guys.
Yeah, lower yards per catch average, but they catch a lot of balls. Or they offer you touchdowns. You got Kelvin Benjamin, I'm going to get in the end zone. Dez Bryant, I'm going to get in the end zone.
Or all of the above.
Or you can take all the above with Antonio Brown. I mean, you have multiple double-digit touchdown seasons from Antonio Brown. You have 1,800 yard. That for one guy, you hear that number, and maybe I think Julio's in that category too, because they were both that high. They can do it again. Those guys are. You don't look at it and go, boy, that was a crazy outlier for Antonio. Well, he missed Big Ben for part of the year, and he put up 1,834 yards. So
we had an awesome conversation with a Footclan member who has this. I mean, we've talked about it before, but that debate of who do I take, and in his situation, it was keep first in the draft for their first round pick, Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell, and that's a conversation you usually can't have. So I think Mike and I went Antonio Brown, Andy, you went Le'Veon Bell, but the fact that you can have that conversation says what he can do. This past year, he led the league in the percentage of team receptions in games that he started with 34.8%.
That is monstrous.
That is, if you don't know,
target share is ridiculous.
Yeah, if you don't know the frame of reference for that, it's absurd. And now with Martavis Bryant going out, you have the questions every time the wide receiver 2 goes out. Well, does it help? Does it hurt? Sometimes you hear both arguments. Well, last year we saw what happened when Martavis Bryant was out. And the truth is, when you've got a guy like Antonio Brown, He's already getting the best coverage that the defense can do. They're not trying to take Antonio Brown out. And now Big Ben is just looking at him more and more. Antonio Brown, to me, is my number 1 pick in the draft. Certainly my number 1 wide receiver in all formats.
The crazy part about Brown is there was those couple games. You had the Michael Vick games where Brown lost his streak, the 5 for 50. His pace with Ben Roethlisberger, in which that's highly questionable. Ben Roethlisberger playing all 16 games, granted. However, his pace with Roethlisberger would have set single-season records in targets, receptions, and receiving yards with almost 160 catches for over 2,100 yards. I mean,
that's almost exactly what Julio would have done with Roethlisberger.
Here's what I will say. Antonio Brown did not hit his ceiling with over 1,800 yards. He didn't hit it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the extrapolations of those. The argument is compelling enough. I mean, he I think can be expected to put a unconscionable season out there again without it being weird. You know, he's done 2 years in a row that way. What I like about Brown is you don't seem to see the same negative arguments about the coverage he's facing or the DBs he's facing that you hear about Julio. You know, you saw Julio
with
he had one good game with Norman, one bad game with Norman. Brown is just Brown. I have Brown as my number 1 in standard. I have he's basically tied with Julio in PPR leagues for me. So he belongs there. He is Antonio Brown, and he's very worthy of, you know, the guy we talked to this morning. I don't know if you mentioned it just now because I don't remember, but he had the decision to make between Brown and Lev Bell, but he had Gurley in the third as a keeper.
Right.
So it kind of made it a no-brainer to go with Brown and lock down that position. So number 2 is Julio Jones in our consensus rankings. Do any of us have him outside of the top 2 in their own rankings?
I do.
3?
I have him 3 in standard leagues, and it's not because of Julio. Love me some Julio, but I am huge on Odell Beckham this year.
Right, but where do you have him in half point?
Half point is he is 2.
He's still 2.
Yep.
Okay, so what I meant is you don't have him outside of.
Nope, we're 1 and 2 across the board in our half point PPR format.
So just like Antonio Brown, he had 136 receptions last year. He had more yards, 1871. His big issue is touchdown consistency.
Oh no! Breaking news.
Really?
Yeah, this stinks. Andy, you're gonna need to play the drop for this.
There's so many different drops I could play for this, but we'll start here.
Breaking news.
Apparently, trade talks for Colin Kaepernick have been called off. No!
Eat it!
No!
I will serve thy pie. Thy humble pie. Eat it.
Wow, that stinks.
Bunch of knuckleheads.
Hey, is there still time to trade him? Could it come back to life? I will not until game 1. I'm not hopping off of this.
I was worried it was going to go the other direction. I had no idea what text that was going to be.
All right, where were we here?
So
Julio.
Here's the thing for Julio Jones. Monster season. My biggest question mark for him is Matt Ryan. Everyone feels like the feeling is Matt Ryan had a horrible statistical season. You know, he couldn't handle the new Kyle Shanahan offense, which there's some truth to that. However, he was essentially right in the average of his career for attempts, yards, receptions, everything except touchdowns. This was the lowest touchdown year of his career except his rookie year. He had 21 touchdowns. That can go up to me with learning the system, being
used in the red zone a little bit more.
So it just, to me, I think Julio Jones can also go up a little bit. You add, he only had 8 touchdowns for Julio. So you put 3 or 4 more on there, and then you're talking just another monster year for Julio.
Yeah, Julio is.
Would anybody be crazy to say I want to draft Julio Jones over Antonio Brown?
Not at all. No, that's fine.
I wouldn't do it, but it's not ludicrous.
I was hoping one of you said yes, because I lean. I'm just the type where, even from a perspective of how many times you had Julio all year last year, how many times was it frustrating to just watch him get semi-hurt and kind of a little gimpy? Obviously, it did not derail his season.
He didn't have that issue for me last year. I mean, he's had that in the past, but I think maybe in the beginning of the year a little bit. But he was. I mean, look at the numbers speak for themselves. And I know you guys are all about Antonio Brown, and okay, he was great without Martavis Bryant. I'm going to give you 2 narratives that you can follow that are possible. I think you will admit that they're possible. 1, the team averaged 7 points less per game with Martavis Bryant out of the lineup as a team. 2, Lev Bell did not play last year. Okay, Lev Bell comes in. He clearly takes a number of targets. He takes a number of red zone opportunities. You got Ladarius Green and Lev Bell now involved in the red zone. You just make that argument. It doesn't mean Antonio Brown struggles or anything. It's just a variable there that, Antonio Brown's not a big guy. He's not going to get a jump ball. He will probably still get the touchdowns that we project him for, but it should just be said.
No, it's a worthy thought.
That's
for sure.
all to say. Julio very well could be the number 1 this year. They were neck and neck all year last year.
Very difficult for how many years has it been since a wide receiver has actually repeated as the number 1 fantasy option? I think it's been
Calvin was the last one.
Yeah, I believe so. So that's a while, which says Antonio Brown. I mean, if history were to repeat itself, if that was something that
did
he can't do. Antonio
I
Brown.
know this is a ridiculous question. Did he finish first in standard?
Yeah.
He did?
Oh, in standard?
In standard
I
format?
believe Antonio Brown did finish first in standard. I'll find that out right now.
I know it sounds ridiculous not to know that off the top of your head, but
he was like so close.
It was so close.
Yeah. So number 3 on our list is the aforementioned number 2 in standard for myself, my man crush of the coming year.
Yeah.
Ruben Randall.
Odell Beckham Jr. OBJ, who is look, he put up numbers.
You're flustered.
Yeah.
I'm blushing because of my man crush for him. His numbers that he's put up in his first 2 years pretty much beat every wide receiver in the history of the NFL, except Randy Moss has him on a couple of categories. But oh wait, Odell Beckham has missed 5 games in those first 32.
That's
he's
fair.
missed 5 games and he's done that. Odell Beckham is just an incredible. He's uncoverable. You're not going to, very similar to Antonio Brown in the sense that there's nothing you can do
quickness. That's just too much.
Yeah, his speed is. He can go long. He can go short. He got his yards per reception to over 15 last year, and I think that with McAdoo taking over as the head coach, the offense is going to be a power in New York. I like a lot of things for him. So talk me off of him.
I'm not going to talk you off of him, but I am going to ask you a dynasty question. He's 23 years old. Antonio Brown's 27 years old. Julio, I believe, is 27 or 26. Who would you rather have starting today in a dynasty league?
Odell Beckham, without a shadow of a doubt to me. When we had that question,
the next 3 or 4 years.
Well, so let's say the next 3 or 4 years he finishes second or third,
right,
to those other guys. But then
that's
5, 6, 7 years. I mean, when we had that show after the show on YouTube. Shout out to our exclusive YouTube shows.
Shout out to yourself. Is that what you just did?
To you two on YouTube. But we asked the question of if you had to start a guy for the next 10 years,
right,
who would it be? And I think Odell Beckham is one of those guys that is in the running for that role.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he had the 5th most yards in the league with 1,450, and he didn't have over 100 receptions where you had like Julio and Antonio Brown with 136 each. You've got consistency in the offense, which you love. You certainly hope he doesn't get banged up repeatedly, but it's not a variable you don't have with Julio. It's not a variable you don't have with Dez.
Yeah, and his game he missed was suspension.
Right. So Dez Bryant, this might be the first kind of, I'm surprised this guy's here. He's number 4 in our consensus list. Now, who has him the very highest? Because I believe I have him at 5?
Yes, you and I both have him at 5. Mike has him at number 4.
Okay, so there you go. He's number 4.
Dez Bryant is just such a monster. 2 years ago, Dez Bryant had 16 touchdowns. That was the most touchdowns for a wide receiver since Calvin Johnson in 2011. My only argument against Dez Bryant is the touchdowns and catches versus the other top elite guys. Dez Bryant is not going to be a 120 catch guy. I don't think it will ever get to that point just with the offense that they run. Could he do it? Yeah, but that's not what they do down in Dallas. They want to run the ball a lot more. However, when you're looking at a wide receiver who you say, who's going to catch 10 touchdowns, you have to put everything you own on a guy that'll catch 10 touchdowns. I'm going Dez Bryant.
Yeah, me too.
Because they, as much as they're a running team, that little zig out route that they run on the goal line is nearly unstoppable for Dez Bryant. So that's why he's up at number 4 for me is I know he'll get the double-digit touchdowns. I know he'll get around 90 receptions, and he's just it is a stud.
Well, a lot of these guys are very close in our projections. I do want to bring this up, though, because for me, I feel like there's a tier here. I feel like you've got – to me, I put Odell Beckham in that top tier with –
The three?
You're saying
with the
before
three.
Dez.
Yes, I'm saying Antonio Brown, Julio,
Yes.
and OBJ are the first tier.
Yeah, I think we
and
all
then there's
agree.
a break to this next group of guys we're talking about who are in this next group so close together. It's flip a 4-sided coin.
Yeah, which I've never seen. So let me
Yep. I'm
going to bring up an interesting – now, our rankings don't reflect this question, but this question is a valid one. There will be a lot of people who would rather have Allen Robinson coming off of last year at that age than the risk or perceived risk of Dez Bryant. Now, we have Dez Bryant at 4. We do not have Allen Robinson up in this category, maybe in the category, maybe in the tier. I don't know where we draw the line there. But Dez Bryant ahead of Allen Robinson. What do you think about that situation?
I think you should have Dez Bryant ahead of Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson is younger, and sometimes we get a little bit too carried away with that. But you've got a guy last year in Allen Robinson who did not he got 14 touchdowns, and he got 14 touchdowns on, for that number, very few receptions. He was under 90 receptions,
80.
Right? 80 receptions for Allen Robinson last year. And look, he was a huge guy from this show. We loved Allen Robinson last year. And still do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He's going to be fantastic this year. But you just look back and you say, well, Dez Bryant, I know what I have in him. I know you can argue the foot. You can argue Tony Romo if you want to go on that. But I'm going to argue that we have years and years and years of him being a touchdown target, whereas we have 1 year of Allen Robinson really all of a sudden being this crazy touchdown target. And it wasn't necessarily red zone. I believe Allen Robinson led the league in receptions over 20 yards last year. So they were bombs, and those are a little bit less consistent, especially after somebody's broken out as that player.
Right.
So I would go Dez here.
To me, like you're saying, people would argue Romo against Dez Bryant. I argue Romo for Dez Bryant. I mean, Tony Romo is maybe –
I was going to have you compare Bortles, Romo.
I'd say maybe
fantasy-wise.
Romo's not clutch or whatever. Romo is a great quarterback. His numbers over the years are actually astounding when you go and look at him and his passer rating. He's a highly efficient quarterback he's the kind of guy who can actually get it done with the lower volume of attempts compared to a guy like Bortles, where you need him to be around the top 3 in attempts to sustain that level of production. Romo, he's so great that he doesn't need to have that high of a volume.
All right, let's move on to the 5th guy in our consensus rankings. He's 4 across the board for me. He's one of my big targets this year for the value, and his name might surprise you, maybe not. A.J. Green.
Don't forget about A.J.
Green. Now, look, A.J. Green is the same draft class as Julio Jones.
Yeah, it was taken before Julio.
Yes, he was, and he's great.
He's taller than Julio. He's better looking than Julio.
Whoa, I didn't know we were going into that kind of analysis.
I've got him ranked number 4 as well.
Jason's very in-depth.
I would take A.J. Green over Dez Bryant in all formats.
Every single year he's played 16 games. He's been a double-digit touchdown guy and also a guy right around the 1,400-yard mark. He's obviously – I believe that the thing that could change him in my rankings – now, these are early rankings. I hope I don't have to say that. I hope you can look at your watch and see what the day is. But – the thing that's going to could change a little bit. I know they're going to draft somebody. They have to draft somebody in Cincinnati.
Brandon LaFell.
Okay, they have to draft 2 people. But that's a piece of the puzzle. We saw Eifert last year, and we think the touchdown regression is coming for Eifert. Doesn't mean he's not going to be a red zone force. Just means that was efficient red zone force that he was. Now, it might not, but –
even if they draft someone, I mean, they lost 2 guys. So if they replace them with –
look, there's a reliability there that is
speaking of reliability, A.J. Green has the most years in a row of all wide receivers in the NFL of over 1,000 active playing, because it would have been Kelvin, but he has retired, of over 1,000 yards. I mean, that's consistency. And the thing is, when you have that kind of consistency in a guy like A.J. Green, you also have potential with him for those monster games where he'll put up, 200 yards and 3 touchdowns and win you a week by himself.
Yeah, and he is capable of that big play, obviously, the long pass. I've had many fantasy week destroyed by one of those passes, the 90-yard touchdown. I just really like A.J. Green this year. I think you still have an offense that is, let's not forget where Cincinnati was last year when Dalton was healthy. They were a prolific offense. I think I use that word a lot.
Prolific?
I think I use prolific a lot.
It's a good word.
Yeah, but I need to kind of.
You got to open up
variety.
thesaurus.com.
So anything else about A.J. Green, or we want to get to number 6 here?
I completely agree. I think he's going to be one of the overlooked guys for whatever reason. He just has that feel, that he's not considered one of the elite guys, and he very, very well can finish on the top 3 easily.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 6 on our list is a darling to many, appropriately, DeAndre Hopkins. Now, DeAndre Hopkins was a shining burst onto the scene.
An
explosion to start the year last year. In fact, he had 13.5 targets per game through week 11.
That's a lot of targets.
Which was the most in the league. That was ahead of guys that finished as the highest reception totals like Julio and Antonio Brown. Now, he had a second half of the year that wasn't as good. And this is like Devonta Freeman, right? Where both of those situations, they burned so bright in the beginning. We said it on the air over and over again. We said, be careful. Not be careful even. We just said the numbers are going to go down.
Not sustainable.
Don't freak out. They're going to go down. It just can't happen. A guy can't. It's like Doug Baldwin, right? You can't have 29 touchdowns in a season.
Careful, old.
Yeah.
Are you projecting
Jason
29 again?
30.
30. Okay.
30 touchdowns for Doug Baldwin this coming season.
That's not. That's
I do love Doug Baldwin.
Just a 2-a-game average. Not a big deal. So DeAndre Hopkins also has the reason he's not up at the very top. In fact, I think he's a lot lower. He's 8 for me.
As a consensus.
10. He's 10 for me in standard.
I think 8 for me. He is one of the guys, and of course, please don't hear this wrong. We love DeAndre Hopkins. His target volume is great, but compared to the ADP, our consensus, this is one of the guys that we have lower than where he is going in your average redraft league. So keep that in mind. We're a little lower on Hopkins than the majority.
You bring in Lamar Miller, you have a great defense, and you bring in Brock Osweiler.
Want to slow the game down, run the ball.
Sure, and even if I will openly say I think everything could be fine, normal for Hopkins. That's a very high possibility. You had Brian Hoyer, you had Ryan Mallett, you had guy off the street last year, and they all
Brandon Weeden.
You had Brandon Weeden, and they all just threw the ball up to Hopkins, and he made plays, and that's what he's going to do. I don't know what the offense is, so that variable of seeing Osweiler in the system with Lamar Miller and the defense, and then the second half of the year being when their defense was good, those things are what works him into the still a 1, probably room for regression. I don't generally draft guys that have what I consider to be their career year. Emmanuel Sanders being the example last year, coming off a career year. I don't generally draft those guys because there's not a lot of room for upside. So that's where I stand on Hopkins.
Yeah, the thing that really hits that home for me, and you mentioned it, was the difference between the first half of the year and the second half of the year, because it wasn't, look, Devonta Freeman, right? He had a big difference first half and second half. He got a concussion. He came back off some injuries, and so we go, okay, what's the reason? Well, when you look at the reason for DeAndre Hopkins' lack of success, he was still great the second half, but definitely not what he was that whole season, was because of the turnaround of the defense for the Houston Texans. And who is coming into this year saying, the Texans D, they're no good. They're going to fall apart.
Did you see that J.J. Watt played with 5 torn muscles?
And now he says
more.
Yeah. Hey, J.J. Watt, you ever come back in a game after you busted
thumb
an
over
eye?
here?
Yeah, I came in with a broken eye, J.J. Where you at?
Then again, you are fine a few days later.
Yeah. So,
but sorry, distracted your point.
But the point is that there is a reason, a correlation for why his numbers dipped a little bit, and I think most people, even those who love DeAndre Hopkins, would agree that the defense is going to be better year-long this coming season than it was year-long this past season, which stands to reason. They'd be throwing the ball a little bit less. You saw, not just gunslinging it as many times as they did last year in the first half.
I got a great question for you guys. Great question. And I think we will go through 8, by the way. I think we'll go through 8, and then we'll do like 8 more on the next show. So wide receivers a little deeper. We'll do that. Here's the question. We just talked about Lamar Miller on the running back shows. I think he was our consensus 5. Now we're talking about DeAndre Hopkins, consensus 6. How would you categorize those guys in that offense? You know, we talk a lot about the Lacy and Jordy Nelson or the Antonio
Same
Brown
team.
and Lev Bell. Now you've got Hopkins and Lamar, who statistically, or I mean projection-wise, they're in this like both worthy of a first-round pick category.
Scares me a lot more than those other teams because I don't see the Houston Texans as this prolific offense that's going.
There's that word.
I'm sorry. They're just going to put up copious amounts of points,
Right.
As an offense. I feel like the Texans are a defense-first team. The Steelers.
Now,
the
could they be the
Packers.
Jets though? Jets gave you lots of Ivory Marshall
and Decker.
Marshall Decker. I'm
Yeah,
just wondering, is that the ascension point?
That would be the ascension. That would be the height. But I'm going to trust the higher profile offenses over the higher profile defenses. And there's a lot of questions here. People don't when there's changes, when there are big sexy changes, people get too excited and they don't realize that sometimes changes hurt, especially in the NFL where I mean, you've got a new quarterback, a new running back. Those things are going to have to be worked out, and they're not as great as the Texans marketing department is going to make everybody think from day one.
All right, I want to move on to number 7. I think this is the most maybe shocking pick so far today in our rankings.
Really?
I do. I think
okay.
We have to be different than the consensus out there among other experts with him. Do you want to see what's his ADP? What's his number?
Jason's looking right now.
So where's he being drafted as?
No,
I haven't revealed the name yet.
Because I love it. He is being drafted in the 3rd round.
What wide receiver?
In a 3rd round. That would put him as wide receiver 13
okay,
outside of the wide receiver.
So we have him at 7, and we're saying, head down to the basement, put your combination in, open the vault, take out your money, take it upstairs, call your broker, say you want to put it all down
on Mike Evans.
Yeah.
Let's invest on Mike Evans. Now, some of you driving, maybe you pump the brakes a little bit. What do we think?
Spit out your coffee.
Let's make the case for Mike Evans, because if it's not happening on this show, it's not happening anywhere else. So make the case for Mike Evans.
It's all about the ascension of his career. He came out a rookie sensation, over 1,000 yards. I believe he was a wide receiver 1.
He was. He was 11, 12.
Just at the back, because he was over 1,000 yards, a monster of the end zone. Now, this year, it was a little bit shaky, it seemed. You had the injury. You didn't know when he was going to play. He had there was even a game where I think he had a bunch of targets and no catches.
He had the game where he had the most drops in 10 years in the history of the NFL, in 10 years.
And the problem to me
6
was Jameis, was Winston, was still learning. Evans had a very large amount of uncatchable passes. So I think that he maximized what he was given, still had over 1,200 yards. So he increased his yardage by a couple hundred. And here is a monster-telling stat. In 2014, Mike Evans scored on 10.3 of his targets. Of receivers who had 50-plus targets, that was 5th highest. Last year, Evans scored on 2.1% of his touches. That's the 6th lowest of receivers over 50 targets. So
good. That's such good news.
We talk about
6'5" receivers. Are those better for the end zone or worse?
We talk about regression from Allen Robinson. And you have to talk about return to the average for Mike Evans. 3 touchdowns. A guy who was 6'5" caught 3 touchdowns.
Coming into last year and in the draft, we were super high on Allen Robinson, and we were a little down on where the norm was for Mike Evans. Everyone was going, this guy had this incredible rookie year, over 1,000 yards. He's 6'5", and he got 12 touchdowns. And we were like, whoa, hold your horses. He caught 12 touchdowns in his rookie year. That's probably not going to happen. And I think we ranked him about where he finished up. We didn't hate him, but we were like, he's not worthy of where he's being drafted. And now the pendulum has swung. He got 3 touchdowns last year, and he was still a great fantasy option. Now you come forward with another year of rapport built with Jameis Winston. Winston moving forward. The offensive coordinator taking over the head coach role in Dirk Cutter. So many things moving toward him being a long-term
what season?
Fantasy star.
What season is Mike Evans entering?
Number 3.
Number 3, the magic season.
He's 22 years old.
For wide receivers. Super young. Oh,
Sounds like we need to go onto Pristine Auction and find some Mike Evans merchandise.
I can
Magic
dig it.
Mike.
I can dig it.
That's what I call him.
So I'm all in on Mike Evans this year.
I thought I was, a couple shows ago, we had a show where we were picking, your vice president, the guy who's going to, for the first time, take that leap to be the guy. And my guy was Mike Evans because I really believe in him. And I was shocked to see when we finished our rankings, you both had him a couple spots higher than I did.
Because you picked Mike Evans. I couldn't pick him.
And look, I don't think what's nice about the touchdown argument is that you're not projecting ascension in 1,000 different categories. Last year I had 74 receptions, I think. I projected him for 81. I don't think he's much more than an 80. He's like Robinson is. Look, his yards per catch were 16.3. Robinson's were in the 17s. I projected him for just 1,300 yards, 80 touchdowns, 80 receptions, but 10 touchdowns, double digits.
Like Doug Baldwin.
Exactly. So Mike Evans, number 7. Let that marinate. Think about him. Just put him into consideration because I know somehow this comes back to Allen Robinson because of how high he finished. You start thinking about, would somebody keep Allen Robinson or would they keep Mike Evans? Would they keep Dez Bryant? Would they keep Allen Robinson? So number 8 is a guy who finished number 3 last year. Okay. Yeah. I think he's probably here. He might move up. I would move this guy ahead of Evans if I knew Fitzpatrick was back, and that's Brandon Marshall. Brandon Marshall, I don't know what it is. I can't look at his stat line without somehow still being surprised every time I see it. I know what it is.
That's fair.
But 109 catches, 1,500 yards, and 14 touchdowns, and he is not somebody who I think it's as anomalous for him to get that kind of a touchdown total. Not that I'm projecting 14, but I think double digits is a pretty safe bet if the pieces are back.
It's pretty safe. So if you take out the 2 years ago when he was on the Bears and he was just getting beat up and he kept trying to play injured and it wasn't working out. So you take that out, besides his rookie year, he averages 1,280 yards and 9 touchdowns.
Wow.
That's ridiculous.
That's bananas.
And I guess I already do have him ahead of Mike Evans. I have him at 5 in PPR and 6 in half.
I think I'm the one bringing Brandon Marshall down in the overall rankings. He would be higher than 8 for us for sure.
Yeah, because I have him at 6. So where do you have him, Mike?
I'm not on the correct page.
Yeah, I can tell you. You both have him at 6. I have him at 13 outside of a wide receiver 1
All right,
now.
so you're the one that needs to talk then.
Defend yourself.
Yeah, I can defend myself pretty easily. And the reason that he is ranked where he is at 13 outside of wide receiver 1 is pretty much because they have no quarterback right now. And I said before the show today, if Ryan Fitzpatrick re-signs, then I will definitely be moving him up because there's no reason to think that – I mean, sure, you could say he's going to miss a couple touchdowns this coming year than he did this last year. I think he had 14 touchdowns. That was his career high. I don't expect him to get 14 touchdowns. He could get 10, and I think that that's a really accurate, serviceable number, which will bring him down from that number 3 wide receiver spot. But that's with Ryan Fitzpatrick. If Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't there – Brandon Marshall has shown he can do it with a variety of wide receivers, a variety of teams. Brandon Marshall is not going to be bad. I've still got him very high, but it is going to take a hit on that offense to have. I mean, what do you want?
So
getting Geno Smith?
Do you want me to do you a favor right now so that you can move on with Brandon Marshall? I don't mind doing this, guys. It's really not a problem for me. 100% chance that Ryan Fitzpatrick is the quarterback of the New York Jets. 100%.
You guarantee it? I can't wait. I'm going to get on the phone and do whatever I can to get Colin Kaepernick traded to the Jets so that I can, in one fell swoop, come in on my white horse.
Okay. So Brandon Marshall.
What is that phone call?
Hey, guys, have you thought about
Mr. Kelly? Come on. Come on.
Brandon Marshall, little known fact here, guys. Brandon Marshall is 3 days older than me.
Ooh.
So what you're saying is he's an old man.
So what you're telling me is
3
that
days.
I'm also older than Brandon Marshall.
You can add him to the list, Mike. The list is long.
My
So,
life is over.
all right, I guess I should run those back, huh? What do we
Yes,
got? Why
top
don't
eight.
you guys do that?
So we got our top 8: Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, and just a friendly reminder: this is half point PPR. That is our preferred scoring format. So that is what this list is from. Antonio Brown, Julio Jones. Number 3, Odell Beckham Jr. Number 4, Dez Bryant. Number 5, A.J. Green. Number 6, DeAndre Hopkins. Number 7, Mike Evans. And number 8, Brandon Marshall. And just my final thing for Marshall, I put him in that category with A.J. Green where they're great, and for some reason their greatness will be forgotten.
Surprising names not in our top 8. Allen Robinson
Yeah.
and Doug Baldwin.
Well, we'll get to at least one of those names on the next show. So let's answer some questions from the mailbag.
Mailbag.
Yeah.
I'll drop this on you. I
Doug
project
Baldwin.
Lockett for double-digit touchdowns, and I think it's
Oh, that's-
easy. I think it's easy.
Ridiculous.
Easy.
I gave him 7. You're giving him like 4 special teams touchdowns? 3?
No.
Because he got several this year. I think he can repeat that. 7 touchdowns, Tyler Lockett.
How many did he have last year?
I think 7.
No, I'm talking about just receiving.
Receiving?
Just receiving.
5?
6.
6?
Yeah.
Okay.
Second half of the year paced was around 10. I don't think easy is the right word for it, but I think it's very possible.
100% Andy
Somebody-
Holloway
oh, gosh.
guarantee.
Somebody has to catch touchdowns for that team.
And
I'm
it's
just-
going to be Doug Baldwin.
how many does Russell Wilson throw for?
30.
I'd say low 30s.
That's
I
a
agree.
lot.
I
That's
agree.
a lot.
You are making my case for Doug Baldwin.
fine.
We'll
All
get
right.
into this in a couple
You guys
weeks.
are
Mailbag. Maybe you
overlooking
should
Luke
write in a mailbag
Wilson.
question from Dougie. All right, mailbag. We've got a few questions here today. If you want to ask a question on the show, you just go to the website, thefantasyfootballer.com, click the submit a question button, or you can dial our voicemail hotline, 302-464-TFFB. First question from John S., huh?
Yep.
Johns, I believe is how you pronounce
Johns. Tons of them. My league allows 2
Anyone
keepers.
2 anyone keepers.
So is that any position?
Well, I think it's because it's 2 anyone keepers and 2 developmental keepers.
All right, and it is half point per reception. My what is that?
My Devo keepers. So the development
Oh.
keepers, I'll take over here. My development
Yeah, I
keepers
don't know what it is.
are Kelvin Benjamin and DeAndre Hopkins. For his anyone keepers, he has to pick between Andrew Luck, Julio Jones, or Lamar Miller. Would you try and trade away Julio for draft picks and keep Luck and Miller, or just send Luck or Miller back to the draft?
I would not try to trade. I would keep Julio
and Lamar.
Jones and Lamar Miller, and I would happily send Andrew Luck back to the
If
draft.
you start with Kelvin Benjamin, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, and Lamar Miller, you are in a great position set up for this next year.
My question is, so he can trade Julio and keep the other 2. Can you not trade Luck and keep Julio and Miller?
Sure you can. You probably just can't get as much, and he's thinking
I think that's
cash in
fine,
on-
though. Yeah.
Yeah, look to trade Luck.
So
and
would
get
you
something for him.
look to trade him, or would you rather send him back into the draft and hoping that you're going to pick him?
Yeah,
No,
I would get
the
value.
First one.
You would trade him away?
Yeah, because I don't have any special attachment to Luck. Why
Yeah.
would I?
That's fair.
And you don't get anything by having a chance at drafting him.
Yep.
You get something if you get something back for him.
All right, Cameron in Texas. I'm in a 12-team, 3-keeper league with special scoring. I have so many good players to choose from, and so I find myself flip-flopping every day. That's a good problem, but a problem nonetheless. I have Jamaal Charles, Lamar Miller, Doug Martin, A.J. Green, Jordy Nelson, Tyler Eifert. He says he's potentially looking to trade A.J. Green for the second pick in the first, so I can hopefully grab Jordy and then pick Eifert at my 6th spot.
Well, clearly based on this show, you would know that we like A.J. Green more than Jordy Nelson.
we do.
So
Because
I would
Jordy's
not,
name did not come up in the
right.
first
So
8.
I would not do that last
Especially
part.
adding keeper into it. Not that you're going to go crazy with the future of only 3 keepers. However, AJ Green, Jordy Nelson. Jordy Nelson's 31. or going to be 31 this
Coming
year,
off of ACL.
then give me A.J. Green.
Yeah, so he says there's special scoring. Let's deal with that first because he says in the other parts he gets bonuses for 300 yards, 400, and 500 for QBs, 6 points per passing touchdown, bonuses for 100 yards and 200 yards for the positional players. Does that factor into you guys at all in any consideration?
It depends on the bonus scoring.
The quarterback one does. That's the one that I consider a little bit because there are certain guys that are just locked in for 300-plus yards that push that envelope. Big Ben and Luck to me, they push those. And obviously the league leaders in, a Breeze and those type of guys versus Russell Wilson, right? Who doesn't really hit those thresholds very often.
I would say we have a bonus in our league of record. We have the 2-point bonus for the 40-plus yard touchdown. I mean, those types of things, and they don't really factor in. If it's only a point or two, I won't get too carried away with it, letting it impact my decision.
Yeah, me too. I pretty much
it just makes the game more fun.
Let me add one thing to this. One of the things I don't like about that trade is the fact that you would then lock yourself into picking Eifert at the 6th pick in the draft. That just doesn't seem like a good place to put yourself in, not knowing what the other keepers are. You'd be kind of thinking, okay, I don't want to lose him, so I'm just going to draft him here. I just feel like you might have better options. Obviously, we're a little lower on Eifert. We don't dislike him, but we think
I can pretty much say, no matter who's on the board, I mean, not no matter, but given this situation, I'm not picking Tyler Eifert with my 6th pick there in almost any situation. Personally.
Well, and that's basically his first pick in the draft. He'd be trading Green for that 2nd pick, but his first pick was going to be Eifert.
Let Eifert be grabbed by someone else or grab him later if you can.
All right.
So
Cesare?
Well, we didn't answer so we got to keep 3 of Jamaal Charles, Lamar Miller,
goodness.
Doug Martin, A.J. Green, Jordy Nelson.
Oh, okay. So Charles and Green are locked in for me, and my
Doug Martin.
My third would be between Miller and Martin. I think I would take Miller.
And I would lean with Andy and go Doug Martin here.
Wouldn't you argue that Martin's safer with the Charles variable, and so you wouldn't want like two, Lamar Miller, new system, Jamaal Charles,
maybe
coming back from the injury, you just have one less risk?
I don't know if it's definitely safer. I mean, Lamar Miller has honestly never really had a bad year.
Right, but anytime you change teams, look, he could ascend and be incredible this year, or he could,
maybe he ends up like Doug Martin.
Right, yeah. So I would rather go Doug Martin.
Which Doug Martin? You have a 50% chance.
Last year's.
Rookie year.
All right. So there you go. There's the opinions. Basically, you know that Charles is locked in, Green's locked in, and you can side with your favorite footballer there. All right. This is either Caesar or Cesare.
Or
in Baltimore.
Cesare.
Or Cesar.
We apologize.
Yeah, well, it's
At being
hard to read.
I believe it is Caesar.
Caesar.
I'm pretty confident.
I'm already keeping AP and Brandon Cooks because of my flex options. You can pick up to 4 wide receivers or 4 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. Please choose.
I believe you meant running backs. You said 4
wide receivers and 4 running backs.
Yes.
Or 2 tight ends. Please choose one more player. Choices are Woodhead, Karlos Williams, Delanie Walker, Travis Kelce, Larry Fitzgerald, Kamar Aiken, Willie Snead, or Dorial, Green-Beckham. You guys are the hold on. This is the most important part. You guys are the absolute best. No contest. Made 2 championships last season. Won with the help of your analysis. I could have won both if it wasn't against both Cousins and Rule 86 in the final week. Yeah, I mean, I've heard that.
Oof. Full point PPR. Man. So the Green-Beckham has the highest ceiling. I think.
I don't think
ceiling.
So.
I don't agree with that either.
In a full point PPR, I think Willie Snead is going to guarantee outproduce Green-Beckham. You're saying that because of touchdown potential. But
yeah.
How is Larry Fitzgerald not being considered after 109 receptions in a full point PPR?
I think because of the way he regressed in last year. 109, that was like
9.
Yeah,
that's actually very fair.
That's my pick.
As a PPR,
that's my pick. My full PPR for sure.
It's ironic because my pick is none of the guys we have mentioned. My pick would be Danny Woodhead. I think in a full point PPR, he is the last 2 healthy years in a full point PPR. He's a running back 1.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking between Green-Beckham and Woodhead, but I'm going to throw Fitzgerald into the conversation just because of the PPR. I don't think you're going to get a Larry Fitzgerald who was a kind of like a touchdown machine the first half of the year. I think you get more of the second half, which is the possession type of guy. You know what? No, I'm going Danny Woodhead.
That's fine.
I'm flipping to Woody.
I don't mind that at all. I'm going to lean Larry. I think 90 receptions is
You
pretty
gave him
locked in.
You gave him 94
There you go.
in your stats.
I'm glad that you couldn't disprove me horribly by looking at my stats. So right around there. Definitely have him coming down. All right, so that does it for the mailbag on today's show. We will be back on Thursday. We will hit 9 through 16, and then maybe throw in a little extra sauce at the end.
That's generous of you.
We'll probably still need to talk about like Doug Baldwin and
Ooh, he's not
we'll
in
see.
the top 16?
I don't know where he ends
I don't
up.
think he is in the top 16. I've done my best to push him up there, but
And a reminder for everybody on the website, thefantasyfootballers.com, you can go on there and we will be publishing our early rankings. These ones we're talking about in their entirety within the month of April.
Ooh, very nice.
They will be up
very
there
nice
within the month of April in their entirety, probably some changes. I will also say this. If you are a fan of fantasy football, okay? So those of you out there that are a fan of fantasy
you've
football.
made it to this point in the show.
That's right. If you're into fantasy football and you want to be in a league, a high-quality league, head over to jointhefoot.com. We just set up for our supporters of this show. This is an independent podcast. We have a site, jointhefoot.com. You can get involved with the show. If you support the show, you get access to the Footclan Leagues website where you can join local and online leagues from committed fantasy football players around the country, fellow listeners of the show. Challenge yourself, put yourself in a good league, if for no other reason to learn more and more and more about playing in competitive leagues and with good people. And so we've got that up. So check it out on jointhefoot.com. That's not all you get access to. If you support the show, you get every supporter gets access to an extra episode of the show every single week where we just do mailbag questions from Footclan members. And you get access to an exclusive episode that we haven't ever released anywhere else, which is the top 10 mistakes you can make in fantasy football. So there's a bunch of really cool ways you can support the show, and you help keep us going as a year-round podcast. And we do want to say to all those that are on there, the 1,000+ that are supporting, we are very appreciative of what you're doing. And we are not taking that for granted. We go every single day, all day long, working to create resources for you guys into creating a show that isn't, hopefully by now you realize this isn't off the cuff. We don't turn the microphones on and then start screaming names. Two of us don't. And
Doug Baldwin!
There it is. But we put a lot of work into this because we want you to enjoy. That's what it is for us. It's enjoying fantasy football. It's winning. Winning is part of enjoyment. And that's how we look at it, right? Like it's enjoying fantasy football. And so we want you to win because that's part of enjoying it. But that's not, we're not on here and just spewing stats at you. We want to be entertaining. We want to enjoy what we're doing. And we want you to enjoy your ride to work or your mowing of the lawn or your pumping iron. Thank you. I needed that. But that's the purpose of this show. So, again, thank you very much for listening. We will be back on Thursday. This show is a 5-day-a-week show when the season hits, when draft season hits, probably August. We'll probably be at 3 a week. I'm going to just be honest. We'll probably be at 3 a week in July.
In July, yeah.
So stay tuned all season long. Guys, do you have any other parting words that aren't Doug Baldwin related?
No, I've got one that is, now that we're through the mushy thank yous, on to important stuff like the show after the show, where I will be defending peanut butter and honey against peanut butter and jelly.
You don't want to miss that. Only on YouTube. Check it out.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Join our fantasy football community on jointhefoot.com and follow us on Twitter @TheFFBallers.
Doug